So, hi, Praveen. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, so I remember that before my undergrad, during the JE counseling days, I bothered you a lot with various questions about how aerospace engineering at IIT Kanpur was versus some other departments and all. And I remember you were super helpful back then. And yeah, whatever your advice was really helped. So yeah, I have not been in touch with you after that, I guess. So what has been your journey so far during your undergrad as well as after that?
Yeah, I think I remember you two asking all the important and interesting questions, I think. And that's kind of the right approach, I would say. If you are getting into something, you should inquire about it. Um, Coming back to my personal research journey or whatever, I started my undergrad in 2012 in aerospace engineering, and I was very interested in aerospace engineering. So it was a great match at IITK. I think for me, research started really in my second year. Um,
Hmm.
it was a horrible idea to be in IIT Kanpur for the summer in my second
Yeah,
year. It's really hot.
yeah.
I was working in on computational fluid dynamics problems, and I found that for a large part of my undergrad, I was like very influenced by the courses I liked. I used to think that that will somehow translate into research. So if you are getting some good professors for some courses, or they just seem to connect with you,
Hmm.
um, you seem to think that you will like that subject a lot. So in my second year, I did that. In my third year, actually, summers, I went to Germany, to Heidelberg University.
Hmm.
They have an interdisciplinary computer science and engineering um, summer post-bachelor program, and I did some research there on spray burners. I was modeling spray burners, so it was like some normal fluid dynamics, some liquid droplets, combustion
Hmm.
problems, things like that. And yeah, I actually was able to pick something smart enough, interesting enough, which did not require me to write, for example, the full CFD code, but like only parts and routines of it,
Hmm.
focus on a small problem of micro mixing. And I was able to get a first author paper out of it.
Hmm.
I think in retrospect, it kind of only added to my misdirection.
Okay.
In undergrad, it's a great experience. You do some research and you get published and you get a first author out of a 3 month
Hmm.
um, journey. And then you feel like, okay, you're on top of the world, everything's going well.
Yeah.
In my final year, I worked with a great professor at IITK,
Hmm.
somebody, I would say, my first research mentor in many ways.
Hmm.
And he was working on problems with re-entry physics, and he was using some kind of a semi-molecular, not really molecular, pseudo-molecular modeling for rarefied flows. So I was looking at things like that. So if you have like a thermal protection system, how it wears off, I was able to get some results that really matched NASA's finite element analysis. So I was very excited about those things. So
Hmm.
to me, while applying for grad school, and I did my grad school application twice, I should add that. But
Hmm.
that was the entire motivation. I was like, yes, this is something I'm really interested in. I'm very good at it. Seemingly, I get good results from my research. So it was all a lot of positive reinforcement.
Hmm.
That's not always how things turn out well. When you delve deeper, when you leave this undergrad phase and you are delving deeper into a subject, enough to realize nuances of it, then you realize maybe this is not something of interest to me,
Hmm.
or maybe this is something, the interesting parts of it are done to death now. So for me, in my master's, I still wanted to do computational fluid dynamics. I was doing that at University of Maryland, College Park, Aerospace Engineering Department.
Hmm.
And I was doing this really cool thing where I was modeling detonations and explosions. And that's amazing. You have like these things which are burning, and they are burning at some Mach number of 3 to 5.
Hmm.
So it's amazing to model that. But the real application of that is these days in detonation engines, which is a new concept. All kinds of engines that we have on airplanes right now, they are completely different from detonation engines. And so that is what I really wanted to do. So if I'm working on detonation, I don't want to have any kind of glass ceiling over me. I want to work
Yeah.
on the best problems. Um, but unfortunately, it's also a technology that's very near and dear um, to the defense sector. So it's very difficult as an international student to contribute to
Okay.
that.
Hmm.
And the other problem, so I was working on it from a mine safety perspective because coal mines can accumulate this fuel and dust, and they can have accidental detonation. So my problem was not to engineer the detonation, but to actually mitigate it, find out conditions that will probably set it off, so that we can stop it from happening. And I did well. I got a first author again from my master's out of it, in one of the best journals in combustion. But I was not happy because this is not the kind of research you want to do. Also, I realized a lot of nitty gritties about my field, which I wouldn't as an undergrad. I realized that this constant nuance of trying to figure out whether the errors in your model are actually physical versus numerical, because you don't really solve differential equations on computers, you solve difference equations on computers, which are approximations. And how much of it is contributing to what you're seeing, those are not the nuances I was interested in. So this is like an advice to anybody who's like really early in their research career, like as an undergrad, if you're interested in something, think of it this way. If a subject was not worth studying and like not enough people found it interesting, it's probably not going to be on any curriculum. Yeah. So every subject that's out there, people have researched it for years and years, right? So classroom is a performance. When professors are year after year, and now I say that even as a TA who has some teaching duties, if you go and perform year after year that same course, you know how to captivate your audience, you know what to say, you know how to say it, that anybody can find everything interesting. Now I'm doing neuroscience. Sure, that's interesting. If I was doing something else, I'm sure I can make that sound very interesting. And so it's that kind of weans away later on. So it's very important before you commit to research, especially for those who are thinking directly of a PhD after they're out of their BTech. A lot of them end up not being happy later on because you don't have that depth of knowledge in your undergrad. So like, research your area really well, good enough to at least have a paper to yourself, and not something like I had, something more involved, and then see if you really like the topic before you make a move on to it.
So by not liking or liking the research, do you mean like your day-to-day routine or the overall question that you are using?
Really, the overall question that you are trying to solve, and how much do you think that is worth it? So in this regard, I think one of the professors at University of Maryland really helped me, because I was very confused. I could easily finish my PhD, and have a good, interesting life doing some of these research problems that I was doing on detonations and explosions, even from a safety perspective. I could have done that. People have careers out of that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But this professor is somebody who was a young professor from India, and he's very active socially, and he seems too excited by his research. So I was just talking to him, and he told me something like, which sounds very cheesy. He said, Praveen, if you are not excited enough about your research problem, that you wake up at 5 a.m. and the first thing you think about is, okay, what is the result of my simulation that was going on? Does it match with what I was thinking? Then maybe you should not be doing it. To be honest, I'm falling a little short of that. I'm never excited at 5 a.m. about research.
Yeah, that's one extreme.
But that part is at least there. Like, a part of it is at least true. Maybe not at 5 a.m., but maybe at 9 a.m. after I've had my coffee. I really need to know what happened from the things I was running last night, and I really need to know. So yeah, the questions need to resonate with you. Otherwise, the interest is going to wear off later.
Okay. So when you were finishing your undergrad, you decided that you would do your master's in aerospace and then see how it would span out. So was that like a conscious decision to not to apply directly for PhD, but a master's?
So it was a mix of both. I applied for some master's program. I applied for some PhD programs. When the admits came, I had gotten into quite a few of the PhD programs. And some of them, even though they are not supposed to do that, they were kind of pressuring me to make a decision sooner, and like informally communicate to the professor. Otherwise, they will not make the offer. People do things like that. But I was very lucky to get a master's program which was funded, because it's incredibly rare to do that. And well, not just funded, it was funded almost better than most PhD programs. So I was very happy, and it was the University of Maryland. So it all clicked. I thought, okay, maybe I should try to play it safe and just do the master's first, gain the experience, and see if I really like this. So at least I would give myself that credit that even though I was like really blown over by aerospace engineering research, I was like, okay, maybe if you are getting paid well for a PhD student or for a master's student, and you're getting a master's, maybe first do that and see where it leads to. And I chose that consciously over some problems, which were maybe even more interesting had I directly decided to go to the PhD program, because I remember University of Minnesota has a great aerothermodynamics program with the same kind of those semi-molecular, pseudo-molecular simulations, mostly Monte Carlo simulations in rarefied flows, and that was something I really liked. So, but I did make the conscious effort to prefer the masters. And yeah, why not? Like if you can, if you think you're going to like something and you are given this option where you could, try it for some time and make some money off of it, you should first do that. Be certain you'll like it and then delve into it. But I understand that's not always the option, and many people I know just directly applied from BTech or BS, and then their experience is good. They like it. As long as you're liking it, it's fine. It works out.
So how did your research, how did it evolve after your master's?
Yes. So by the end of my master's, I was honestly, due to many reasons, really frustrated with my research. One was definitely that the options in my current area were limited, and I didn't like. I want my talent to be my glass ceiling. I don't want external factors just laws and red tape to be my limit. But other than that, the second part of it was that I was not really liking what I was doing, because if you don't do the cool application part of it, the dry science was quite boring, more or less. It was like, I know every PhD is an incremental effort, but this was like a delta of delta effort.
Okay, yeah.
So at that point in my second year, I started exploring a lot. I don't think I read that much ever about so many different fields. And my second graduate applications were all over the place. Usually you don't have these kind of standard applications are just like in one field. My applications there were some in nanomaterials, there was some in tissue engineering, there was some in mechanobiology, there were some others in computer vision, completely all over the place. So, but there was a pattern to it. It was not like it was very random or I was being stupid. I did apply. I know computer vision, for example, or machine learning is incredibly competitive. So if I apply to, say, CMU after doing a master's in aerospace engineering, having nothing to do with AI, I'm not going to get it. Even though my grades are fine, even though I'm a good researcher and I have papers to prove it, it's just not going to work out. However, being a University of Maryland student gives me an advantage in that program itself. And I actually took some courses in the computer science department. I'd taken a machine learning course in the computer science department. I know the professor well. I had outperformed almost everybody in the computer science. Well, maybe not everybody, maybe in the top 5 percentile, something like that. So the professor knew me well. And the second part of it was to convince people. Now you have a diverse set of applications. So what people are looking for, according to me, and I don't really know if it's true, I've not been on the other side of the table yet. What people are looking at, or looking for rather, is not clueless people. They are trying to look for people who know what they're talking about. So you are trying to apply to computer vision and you say something outdated, which has been done for just because it's cool or it's in the media, people are not going to hire you. So I did my research on every single subject and why I wanted to apply to it and what is the latest questions that people are actually focusing. And yet I did not overload my SOPs with like technical jargon. So I simplified it to a point where it would come from somebody who's an outsider, but it would clearly show that my instincts are spot on. Like I know exactly what is going down today in that field, and that's the kind of questions I'm asking. And so for example, to give it a very layman perspective, if I would have written in my SOP, hey, I want to do image segmentation or classification based on computer vision, people are not going to hire me. But if I say, hey, if there's an image of somebody, let's say a crossroad, and there is a man standing there, and I want to know what the man is going to do next. Most likely, if the signal changed, he's probably going to start walking. That's a problem in computer vision that at least 2 years back was pretty important. So you have to know, and you're talking to experts, and they need to understand that you have the correct direction. Same was true for everything else that I applied to, whether it was tissue engineering, whether it was nanomaterials, or mechanobiology. Of course, I ended up doing imaging, which has got nothing to do with the rest of them.
Okay. Like normally what happens is that you apply to one field and then different universities, but then you are new for example, for me, it was in astrophysics, and I knew various open questions in astrophysics because I was working in that field for some years. But it's quite interesting that, as you say, that you applied to different departments. So how did that happen? Like,
I guess frustration will make you do a lot of things. It's honestly just that. I think if you're frustrated in your field of research for some time, and you're unhappy, you will look for ways to branch out. And that's the second unique perspective that I can offer that probably not a lot of people that you will interview will offer. It's research is, your research interest cannot be unitary. Your exposure might be limited. So you're doing astrophysics today and you really like it, great. But that cannot be the only thing you like. If you were exposed to other things, maybe you like other things. Maybe if I was exposed more to astrophysics, I would like it more. Except for the math, it's too much for me. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, when I was frustrated in my area, I was trying to do a couple of things. I was trying to find fields, first of all, just like I treated this like a mathematical problem, right? So I wanted to find out every single field that might be of interest to me, and also fields which have a lot more things at a basic science level to be discovered, because I didn't want to be limited by the same problem where fluid mechanics theory is very well known. So I wanted to be like, okay, if I don't get into the applications part of it, just the science part of it, is that interesting enough for me?
Okay, so basically those fields which are kind of still developing and where the textbook is still being written, kind of.
Exactly, colloquially hot fields. So I searched every one of them, and at this point, I didn't put any restriction on myself that I'll have to learn more. I just accepted that as a reality. And next, I was able to kind of shortlist it a little bit based on what is even the vaguest connection that I can use to sell what I'm doing as a useful background to apply for that, because nobody is doing charity here. They really serious researchers. So for example, even though I'm doing imaging right now, when I was applying to Yale, imaging was not on my list of things. It was difficult. It was a hard sell. I'm doing physics-based modeling, and imaging is a highly statistical field. I was not even thinking about imaging. That happened much later when I was visiting Yale, and well, as fate would have it, my professor, my current PI, was just presenting, and I found his work really cool. But more on that later. Right now, what I was doing was I was trying to think, okay, what could I do in, let's say, Yale's Biomedical Engineering department, which is cool enough, and I can show some connection. One of the things that popped up into my head was all kinds of biomechanics problems. So, for example, how cells would migrate from maybe the vasculature to the tissue, or from one tissue to the other, or just in their local environment, extracellular matrix. A lot of those research uses the same concepts that we learn. In fact, there's a professor in BME at Yale using statistical physics and sometimes even classical physics. I mean, statistical still classical, but something like really simple, like force and energy, to study how cells migrate. And that's pretty important for how cancer metastasis develops. So you need to find connections, and once you have a set of tools and skills, so my hard skills here are math, they are physics-based modeling, I have the ability to write code. These are all in-demand things, and you can always try to work around and try to find certain things which match up and which can make you stand out as a candidate. So that was the other thing. So that's how I shortlisted. And then I applied, and sometimes I was smart. For example, if I'm sending it to a computer vision department, I just limited myself to University of Maryland so that I get the advantage of being a University of Maryland student.
Mhm.
So it worked out. I would say, because I applied to, I think, 10 to 12 places. I got into 5 to 6 different programs in the US and in Canada.
Mhm.
So overall, I think that was a successful strategy. But yes, it was a lot of work. You
Yeah.
needed to know, as I said, exactly what you're talking about, what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work even when you are doing it for just one field, and to do it for like multiple fields.
Yeah, in fact, so Yale does interviews, right? So they have interviews before they will give you an offer. And one of the one of the questions that was asked to me is, you sure you're applying to? Not in those words, but I felt it. You sure you're applying? You know where you're applying? You're applying
Yeah.
to the BM department from Aerospace Engineering. And I anticipated that question. So I had an entire project in mind with a very realistic 3D tissue scaffold using two photon imaging, and how I'm going to study something very particular in biomechanics. So I had an entire problem mapped into my head. And so when I was asked, I was like, yeah, I have all of these ideas. And that was at that time a good idea. So they took me seriously, because when other people understand that you've done your homework, then they start taking you seriously. They're
Mhm.
impressed.
So this homework was this about going through recent publications and
Oh, you name it. Going through research publications, yes. Understanding the field. So research publications can be very misleading if you read a few of them, as we all know.
Mhm.
Um, so consensus papers, reviews, maybe even some textbook material, maybe just some Googling online,
Mhm.
and then thinking about, okay, now if I have to propose, now we have this thing, right? A prospectus or an area exam in most PhD programs, where you need to propose something. They need to see that you can think of an original idea and you can do some research. Even if you don't end up doing it, you can just think about it and what are the questions to ask, how you will go about doing this. So it's the same exercise that I did for a lot of different fields,
Mhm.
to understand what could be an exciting thing to do. So it's just that initial hesitation when you get out of it. Basically, you're going to have to accept that your knowledge might even be lesser than many undergrads in your own
Mhm.
department, and you are going to ask a lot of stupid questions to
Mhm.
people.
Yeah, I think that's something which a lot of people like have a doubt or a worry that they might want to work in some other field, but for example, their undergrad project or their experience so far had been, say for in your case, aerospace related, and now they're scared whether they must now apply in aerospace related grad school programs. So I think this is a very optimistic thing that one can actually apply for other fields as well if you do your homework well and show your genuine interest.
Your homework, just be ready to be, people are not ready to be exposed. And what most people end up realizing after they do a PhD is none of that matters, or maybe midway through their PhDs, none of that matters, because what you end up working on usually are still, even in your field, are things or concepts or mixtures of those concepts that were out of your initial preparedness anyway. So you
Mhm.
are going to face that hesitation. There will always be experts, and then there will be experts among those experts. And so this hesitation just needs to go away at some point in time. And you just need to be like, okay, sure, I'm going to try something cool. And if it looks stupid, it's okay. That's fine. Who
Mhm.
cares?
Okay. So once you decided that you wanted to go for grad school, both when you applied the first time as well as the second time, how did you go about choosing the universities or the research groups you would want to apply to?
Yeah, I think that leads also to how many applications you make and
Yeah.
how you divide your applications. So definitely, you want to consult some people if you don't have an understanding yourself from previous
Mhm.
results or previous batches. You need to consult some people to gain an idea of what your profile is like. And the profile is not just um, this is a common question. People are worried, if my CPI is low, um, can I still make it into grad school? Yes, you can, and you can do very well. And or on the other flip side, you might not do very well. But it's somewhat the whole package. It's not just one thing. So you need to first understand very well where you stand in terms of your GPA or CPI. What are your experiences? What kind of projects you've done? Letters of recommendation are extremely important. They're probably the most important part of it. And SOP should not be taken lightly. In my case, it opened doors for me. So much, it's probably at the same level for me of importance as letters of recommendation. So once you gauge what your profile is, you want to apply to 3 or 4 schools that are ambitious, like like they are really ambitious. So if you get in, you are very lucky and you just don't think anything and you just go there. Then the other ones, I kind of like to have 3 at least safe schools, because it kind of depends on how competitive your field is. In computer vision, 3 safe schools might be very few safe schools, due to the sheer volume of applicants. But generally, for most engineering and science fields, 3 safe schools are fine, and the rest should be moderate places, but places where you have at least a couple of people um, who are very good at what they do. They're well respected, have good publication history. If you can find out information about their grants for many fields, that's something you would want to do. For example, for biology, you would want to check if they have active grants in the areas that you're interested in. And yeah, then you should apply. One caveat is, personally, I think you should never apply to a department if there is only one PI you can work with. You don't know them. Even if you've done some homework, you've tried to contact past students, which is a great idea, by the way. Talk to the past students, talk to the present students. But it could happen that you and that PI just don't work well together. So, and then you are in this hot mess. So you don't want to.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how I divide my applications, and I think.
Also, on a related note, like also there's this query that do we need to email the professors or the research group beforehand before applying? Does that help in the application process, like specifically to the departments and groups you applied to?
Application process. Most good places it wouldn't matter. But here's where my take on it is a little different. It kind of depends on the university. Some universities, and these are usually your most ambitious universities, your Ivy Leagues or your public Ivies, it doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter if you contact a professor in UCLA, they'll tell you the same thing. Or in Stanford, they'll tell you the same thing. Yeah, it's great. It looks like you are a competitive applicant, but please apply to the program. We can't do anything. We can't really find out anything. Because these universities want to do like quality control of their incoming cohorts. And then once they are in, then they try to match them with professors and try to make it equitable for everyone. However, there are a lot of programs where the decision is going to be made on the basis of the PI. And in fact, when your offer letter comes, your offer letter is contingent to you joining that PI, because the funds are coming from that particular professor themselves. The department is not funding you, the professor is. And so in such cases, it actually can help because the professor needs to go over your application material and you have put their names down, but they're busy with 50 different things, they've not seen it, so it could help. What I would suggest is look at the FAQ sections or talk to the program administrators, which are usually not faculty. They are very helpful usually because they want to recruit there. They want all the top talent to come to their university, so you should talk to them and figure out what the situation is. If it's kind of just a cohort-based decision and the professor can't play a role, which in most top departments, I would say that is a trend, then there is no point. You can just mention, if you really want to, you can just mention in the email, yeah, I have mentioned you down in my SOP, I'm quite interested, but it won't help. In the other programs, which are most of these good engineering state schools, that might actually help you. So it's a toss-up.
Also, that you mentioned about funding. So how does that work for most of the departments that you know about for grad school, both master's and PhD?
So finding a funded master's program is incredibly rare. Most departments wouldn't do it. There isn't enough in it for them. They pay a lot for your course. You hardly do research. I would say that for PhD programs, if you have an option of going to a department where the department is funding you, that's providing you some support, for maybe 1 year, maybe 2 year, or maybe you have outside funding, basically anything other than a specific professor funding. That is to be preferred. That is something you should consider very strongly about influencing your decision. It's a very important parameter, because if things are not going well with one person, you're still funded by the department and you have enough time to find another one. In terms of masters, I would say, since it's so rare, anybody who's funding you and you want to give them a shot, just go for it. It's just 2 years. And if it's an area you're interested in, even if the person does not, even if it's not great to work with that person, later on you find that you are not, compatible. I think it's 2 years is still a short time and you can do it. So why not?
Yeah. Okay.
But to me, it was a rather simple decision. It was so simple, I never sat for any of the internships or any of the SPO, the student placement office related jobs or on-campus placements, because why take a seat away when I know I'm not going to use it? The problem is the kind of jobs I would want do not exist in India. That's just the set of parameters that I'm looking for. There's some great work, don't get me wrong. There's some great work in DRDO if you're in the right team. There's some great work in ISRO from what I hear.
So you're looking for like research-based jobs, kind of.
Yeah, but I'm looking for core jobs. I'm looking for research-based jobs, and they are also there. But I also have these other limitations where I do not necessarily like the places where they are located at for a career, because it might be just the job and nothing else. So you have to have your own work-life balance and put that into the mix. Or maybe the pay is just too low and it's just a reality, and government jobs have a low pay in India. So that's the reality. Or there might just be a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and things keep moving slowly, or you're aware of some politics that you don't like. So for me, it was a no. And what I don't understand is not a lot of them, not a lot of people I know, but some people are confused between non-core jobs and research. And to me, they are completely distant lands, right? So unless you have a financial burden on you, in which case always take care of that burden before you do anything else. I was privileged enough to not have that. But unless you have that, you should know one way or the other. Because like in my case, I could tell some of these students that I knew who were very inclined academically. They were going just for trying out their luck in consulting companies and BCG and other places. And I knew it would not last, and it didn't. After 2 or 3 years, they ended up applying for PhD programs anyway, because it's just not, to me, it's not rewarding enough. That's not a problem I want to work on, at least not right now, even if it pays well. So it was a straightforward decision for me.
So it's mostly influenced by like the kind of problem you were tackling.
Yeah, you could say that. It is kind of also it's kind of a function of what is also available as the other option, like in terms of jobs. So if I was growing up in China, or if I was growing up in the US, I have tons of companies in doing cutting edge work in what I'm interested in. And they are private companies, they are more merit based. The perks of working in them are more merit based, and they're located at areas where I may want to work in my own work life balance. And so I would, in such cases, if that's an option available to you, sure, I would consider working in the field a little bit, gaining a little more experience before I apply for a PhD. Maybe not a master's, but maybe for a PhD, I would like some hands-on experience. But that was not an option available to me.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a straightforward decision.
Okay. So once you like decided to apply for grad schools, what timeline would you like suggest? When do you start preparing for your SOP versus GRE versus asking for LORs? Yeah.
So I would say write the first draft of your SOP about 4 months in advance, or maybe even 5 months in advance of the deadline of your first deadline. And usually the first deadline is, if I'm remembering this correctly, it's about 1st of December. For some random school, they will have it, and it's kind of annoying. So I would I would write it in August, honestly, be done with it. Be done with the first draft. And then you really, this is where I would like to share what I've learned. And this is really the insider knowledge part of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a bias, okay, when you're applying to Western countries, which is most of the time what you're doing, at least in the context of the USA. What I've realized from my academic writing, from writing papers and writing drafts, talking to professors, there's no good way of saying this, is it? There is a, I feel like there is a way, there is an imprint of how we are taught the language, which is kind of different from how it's taught in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that goes into your SOPs or into anything that you write. Um, it's some of the phrases, for example, can be written much better, suited to a US listener because they would expect to hear it a certain way.
Yeah.
And that delivery is important. I think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to get out of like the perspective that you have, um, unless you have someone to help you. So some of your seniors who have spent, not seniors who've just started their PhD programs, who have actually spent some time in the US. They have kind of semi-integrated. They have spoken to a lot of people here, and they have caught on, hey, this is a very Indian way of saying this.
Mm-hmm.
People here say it this way. So
Yeah.
I think those things make a difference. So that's why I think the first draft of the SOP should be much ahead of time. And then you should send it around to more experienced people and take criticism. For me, when I was writing my my SOP for aerospace engineering for the first time, there were a couple of seniors, one in Austria, one in the US, somewhere on the West Coast, and they literally tore it down. Like one of the guys was brutal on the SOP,
Yeah.
and he tore it down, and he's like, "What the heck is this? What the heck is that? This is very uncertain. What do you mean? Okay, it's not specific enough."
Mm-hmm.
And the first draft, when the result, I got the result back, I was mortified. It was like, I thought I did good.
Yeah. Same for me. Yeah.
How helpful this is. And not every senior will invest enough time in doing that. I was lucky enough that they were there to do it for me. And so from now on, whenever somebody sends me an SOP, I am pretty brutal on it. So SOP, you should do early. GRE, you should do early enough that you can repeat it once if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
GRE is mostly a negative filter, as we all know. Anything, and I might be being, I'm probably being even too conservative with this. Maybe you can take even more liberty with the GRE score, but also taking into account some of the good places, taking all of that into account. Some schools like to have their average GRE a bit higher. I would say in STEM, having anything above 320 is good enough. After that, it really doesn't matter. Um, yeah. But if you didn't get that, maybe you should have enough time to take it once more. So as long as you are doing those things, you should be fine.
Okay. Yeah. Staying on the topic of SOP, like from all those revisions that, as you said, do you remember some specific do's and don'ts? You already mentioned one that it should not be
Definitely.
very generic. They should know
There are a couple
very,
of
yeah.
things. So one of the things people shy away is from really expressing themselves. And while the language could use help, as I said, they're not really reading your SOP because they want a rerun of your CV or your resume. You mentioned all of those things that you did and the accomplishments that you had in your resume. They are trying to get to know the person that did the science
Mm-hmm.
and what that person was motivated by. Why were they motivated by that? What was the good thing? So if you are just saying you did something, how did that make you feel? Was it what was the end result like personally for you? Did you feel excited about it? Did you feel nervous about this whole thing? Were you a wreck after getting some bad results? You should really talk about how all the research makes you feel, and it needs to end where you need to make them understand in brief in just 1.5 pages, ideally, maybe 2 to be pushing it, where you are right now and how you landed up here and what it is that you want to do. Why should they consider you? What are you bringing to the table? But also why you are most motivated in that, in taking that direction. It needs to be a logical conclusion. So if I am saying, like for example, for me, the second time around, it was tricky, right? So I'm saying that I did all of this work, all of this research in aerospace engineering. It was interesting. But then I also have to address the elephant in the room of why I did not like my situation after my master's or during my master's.
Mhm.
That really has to shine through, and then I have to make them also understand why I want to move in this direction. What have I done, or why do I think this is the right choice now? Also, usually towards the end, you want to make it a little personal for every program, because they would like to know that you've done the research. And you should know all the resources that they are giving you and how best you can leverage them, right? You're asking for an opportunity. It would be a crime if you didn't do your homework to know what resources are available. So it should be very personal about, okay, you can start with who all you think you want to work with, but also don't just name one person in the SOP. There should be some synergies that are happening between 2 or 3 different professors, and you should have researched the department. If your work, for example, involves coding, and let's say some university in Texas gives you the access to Texas Advanced Computing Cluster, which is a huge cluster,
Mhm.
and you are not mentioning about that, it means you've not done your homework. Um, so it should be a little, personalized to each department, not just to some research groups or some PIs, but also to the department in general. Those are some, I guess, do's and don't. The main don't is don't repeat your resume. Let the person who did the research shine through with their story. That's what it's supposed to do.
Okay, that's helpful. Also, did you get any feedback ever from any faculty member or any professors regarding any part of the application process, or
You
be
mean
it,
from the people that I've already worked with, or um,
yeah, and any faculty members, like their opinion on what matters in the admission process, or what the
on,
SOP or CV should look like, or anything
yeah,
at all? Yeah.
yeah, I honestly never did that. If that is an option available to you, and
Hmm.
you have the uh, support of a faculty member, I think you should definitely use it. Yeah, in my case, I didn't really do that during my undergrad, and that could have been very beneficial. I obviously could not have done much during my master's
Hmm.
because my professor was
Yeah.
not too happy with me leaving the field and moving to completely different, but later on she supported it. Um, but yeah, I didn't do that. But if that's an option available to you, I think you should use it. Um, don't let people tell you what you can and cannot do. Usually, we have a tendency that when we are contacting some experts and they tell you something needs to be done a certain way, um, we tend to forget that still an n equal to 1, and in statistics it doesn't mean a lot,
Hmm.
even if you're an expert. But yes, try to ask for the questions. Try to, if the professor says write this a certain way, try to ask them why or why not. Just don't take their word as gospel. Try to ask them, try to argue a little bit,
Hmm.
uh, just to convince yourself of what they are saying, why they are saying it, and then you can maybe remodel. But yeah, extra expert opinion is always to be respected, so that would be good.
Hmm. Also, I think you touched upon this slightly, but it's often a big confusion that what actually brings success in a grad school application, whether it's your grades or whether it's your SOP or whether it's your research or some publication. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm not going to sit here and say grades don't matter.
Hmm.
Uh, there are some places on earth right now which are highly competitive, and there, if you are, a little short, even in one criteria, it matters. You're not going to get in. So unless you have like 10 different patterns and like 10 different publications, if you had like a 7 on 10 from IITK, it's difficult to get into Harvard or MIT. It's definitely true. The good thing is this graduate application thing and all the options available to you, hundreds of universities literally that are actually better usually better than the university that you're applying from, means that this is a game where you can optimize. So sometimes if you, let's say you don't have the best of grades, you have to remember to not let that discourage you, because let's get this straight, GRE scores and grades don't mean much. Even if they are correlated, like GRE is not even correlated, it's trash.
Yeah.
But even if grades are correlated to your grad school success, it's not a causality. The causality is probably lying in how determined you are, how much you love the subject. It's not really the grades that is reflective of anything. So, but it's an entry bar. So the first thing you need to do is be confident. It's kind of hard, especially coming now. Here I'm talking particularly about the Indian experience, and in IITs, especially the professors and their grading and how they. I might be biased here, but I think professors in ITK, many of them estimate your self-worth in terms of grades. I think that's BS. And then therefore you really have to fight to be confident. You need to know that you can do well. And I've seen amazing success stories from people who have low grades and have done fantastic, much better than I'm doing at grad school. Also, you need to be smart. If your grades are low, then maybe you should target a department that has a couple of really good researchers for the field. But overall, the department's rank or the university rank isn't so high that you will not get through. And some of these state universities are just fantastic for that. They have excellent people, excellent researchers. And trust me, it will not be to your detriment. It can only be to your advantage that you go to a smaller pond, but you still get the best quality, best lab experience because a top-notch researcher is there. But you are in a cohort where you're not always, scared. I mean, you are in Caltech, so you probably know more about this than anybody else of how intimidating a cohort can be.
Yeah.
But next in line would be probably MIT and Harvard. So you're not intimidated by that, and you can just be confident and do your thing. So, and you can gain every experience that people at those departments are gaining. Yes, there would be some difference in how people could end up treating your PhDs. Yes, there is some bias in grants that people or students write coming from the top universities versus other universities, but you can still largely mold your PhD experience. So if you are an excellent PhD student, good publications, good overall outreach in the science that you've chosen during your 4 or 5 years of PhD, then it will show on your resume, and then your university is not going to hold you back. So it's an optimization game. So whenever people ask me what really is required to get in, I think letters of recommendation and SOP are the most important thing. And SOP, we don't take it as seriously as probably we should be. Grades are definitely important for certain programs. GRE scores might be a little less important than grades, but still they are a negative filter. However, that should not discourage you. There are plenty of programs out there with people who are really good researchers whom you can work with, even if your grades are a bit low. So that would be like my complete answer to that.
Okay. Moving to the letters of recommendations. So in your departments or in the fields that you applied to, how many letters of recommendations are required versus who should you be asking them from?
Yeah, so in most universities, I have seen 3 letters of recommendations. In some programs, there will be 2. For masters, there could be 2 letters of recommendation. But in some places, you even have up to the option of providing 4 to 5 letters. What you should do is you should have at least 2 letters of recommendation from faculty members. I know that's not always a possibility for everyone, so your mileage might vary on that. But if you have 2 professors that you have actually done some research with, and when I say that, I mean you have at least a 6-month experience in their lab, or in my case, you were able to get a lot out of it, something very meaningful out of it in 3 months, then you should be asking them to write letters of recommendations for you. Most professors will not limit the letters you write. Sometimes, if you are in, let's say in a lab, let's say you are in the biological sciences department at IIT, and your two people from the lab are applying for the same year of cycle. Sometimes the professors might say, okay, please don't apply to the same place.
Mhm.
But I can't really endorse both of you equally well. In that case, they just have to be truthful.
Mhm.
And so one of the students would be on the losing side. So sometimes I also know that people in the lab kind of make their decisions on where to apply together, and there are compromises. Okay, you get to apply to MIT and I apply to Harvard, and
Mhm.
all the way down as well. But for the most part, professors don't limit the number of recommendations that you ask. So I have asked people to recommend me to about 12 programs, and so that has been fine. um, I have always taken letters of recommendations from faculty. So during my first application cycle, I think I took it from the professor in Germany that I worked with. I took it from my BTech project, my fourth year advisor. Um, and then I took one more um, from another professor in IITK who I had in the past closely worked with. So sometimes you can also take it from professors who you have taken, who you not had the chance to work with, because maybe two people are already pushing that limit there. So you can take it from people who you've done some graduate level courses with, which are in the same area that you're interested in. So they've got to intimately know you. Maybe one course is not enough, maybe more than one is required, and you've done well in those courses. That's also acceptable, but
Mhm.
usually that's not considered a strong recommendation.
Okay.
You would always want to, and that's why you always want to work with people um, who you think will write decent letters of recommendations. Not all professors write decent letters of recommendations.
Yeah.
Um, some of them are better at doing that than others, and in your early career that matters.
Mhm.
So you should be wise, and you should pick people who seem friendly, who seem like, there are some people who are so caught up in their research, they don't really think of the workforce that's producing that research all that
Mhm.
well. But there are some who understand, and so you should work with them, and you should realize that they'll be honest because their reputation is on the line. So if you didn't do a good job somewhere, don't ask for a letter of
Yeah.
recommendation. That being said, they should refuse. If they are not going to write a good letter of recommendation for you, they should refuse.
Yeah.
But there are some people who say that they will give bad letters of recommendation. So it's a
Wow. Okay.
huge murky area.
Hardly can we call the letter of recommendation.
Yeah, that's
Do you
weird.
have interviews?
Yes, I did. I had interviews. So in some cases, I had just like direct phone interviews or video call interviews. In some cases, there were open houses. That's of course more a thing. If you are already in the country, then they will invite you to the open house,
Mhm.
and you can meet a bunch of people. Um, and generally, you don't want to be clueless in these interviews, but the bar is not like, unless you're doing something like what I did. But usually you are probably just, you've studied something, you know it well, and you're applying for further education there. So in that case, the bar is not that high on these interviews. It's more about interpersonal skills. It's about, trying to understand what is available in that particular department or with some PIs, and what are your interests, and if they are a match. Um, so it will always help if you, before your interview, you have done your homework, they've gone and seen all the research that the department is doing, which professor is doing what could you be potentially interested in, and never try to necessarily you know please the interviewer. It's I think if I'm an interviewer and somebody is just pleasing me, I would realize that.
Mhm.
Usually try to be truthful, and sometimes professors are just interviewing for the department and not for their own personal groups. So you should understand that distinction. But yeah, be well prepared for it, and it should be fine.
But like this whole application process and journey is like quite tedious in terms that you spend so much time per application, and then
Mhm.
still the chance of getting in is so low.
Yeah.
So what advice or how did you deal with, for example, either rejections or this very process of waiting for the results?
Uh, First advice is please don't check Grad Cafe every day.
Yeah.
Good for your mental health. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. But I think anything you need to realize that anything worth doing is usually tough, and people usually are lining up to do it. So there's always a grind. Won't be any easier anywhere else. Um, the most important thing is to be confident in yourself. I think that that's true while you're applying, before you're applying, after you're in with this very nice cohort, and where you think and you have an imposter syndrome that everybody's better than me. Um, in my case, I found ease and comfort in just realizing, hey, I'm starting at zero knowledge. So the bar for me is very low. And I think that helps. Um, so yeah, I think it's a very difficult time. There is no question about it. You're waiting for all of these deadlines, and sometimes people are trying to pressure you. They will informally tell you, we'll accept if you give us an answer sooner. Um, and then it's an optimization problem. You're not sure if you're going to get elsewhere or not. But do the best you can, and always realize that this is just, you know, a mix and match problem. This is um, putting this is a demand and supply thing. This is putting people in some random positions, and it in no way reflects on your particular talents. It's just a grind that will happen. So my favorite word to use for this period is a crapshoot. It's literally a crapshoot, and it will happen. And don't think that a rejection is personal. Many times people get rejected because they could be very good, and I'm telling you this because I knew a few applicants to the Yale BME program. We became friends on Grad Cafe actually, but
Wow.
yeah, they were honestly better than me with their profiles and everything, and they got rejected, and an aerospace engineering student got selected. So they could be very mad about it. They could lose their confidence over it, but they were better than me. They were better prepared than me. I know it, they know it. It's the truth. It's just that the department at that particular time did not have a great match for them. The professors and the kind of work that they were interested in my department, mostly they were interested in nanomaterials. Um, the professors who were doing that work had very saturated labs, and they just didn't have an opening. So they couldn't be offered an admission. And that does not, indicate anything about their self-worth. They probably got elsewhere in pretty decent programs. And in the long run, where do you go to school, which program you join, matters little. It matters a little bit in your early career, but ultimately it doesn't matter. Um, you will just have to do well in this 5 years, sometimes 6 years long grind that is a PhD. And these initial advantages don't translate all that much to success. So you can take solace in that fact, I guess.
Yeah.
It's hang in there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was really nice hearing your opinions about all the various things, especially about how your research interest evolved. I'm sure everyone who would be listening or reading about this would be really would find it really beneficial. So do you have any final words, or can someone contact you if they have any queries?
Oh yeah, sure. People keep contacting me all the time, and I actually take the time out for this. So definitely, you can reach me on Facebook, or you can reach me on my email. I think email and Facebook are usually the best way to reach me. I tend to limit my LinkedIn audience because I want to trick the algorithm into giving me a feed that is actually really productive and in this narrow tunnel of my research on neuroimaging. So probably if you're not in neuroimaging, I'm not going to accept a connection there, but just contact me on Facebook or my email, and we'll get started from there.
Okay, perfect.